So he also says that when you have kids write, you need to have them write about a personal event because any 3-4-year-old can tell a story about what happened to them. And it can be as simple as, I played video games last night, or I went to the grocery store, or I went to the park. And he believes that kids' drawings should be realistic. He likes to say no purple pumpkins. If kids are writing a story about going to a pumpkin patch, their pumpkin should be orange or green. You'll see in the small group video, if you haven't watched it yet, he tells the kids to draw a closed circle for their head because you wouldn't want an incomplete head. So he's very particular about the right number of fingers on the hands because it should be realistic and hold those kids to high expectations. And he also believes to teach reading through encoding using these stories that the kids write. So encoding is the opposite of decoding. We usually teach kids letter names, memorize the letter name, now memorize the sound that's assigned to that letter. Whereas encoding would be, hear the sound, now learn the letter that goes to that sound. So it would be instead of, here's the letter C, what sound does it make? It's asking the kids, what sound do you hear at the beginning of the word cat? K. Yes, and the letter C makes that word. And you can do that through your instruction with your stories. So that is kind of the gist of him. He believes in playing, reading for play, looking at a picture book and having kids make up stories. It's developmentally appropriate. He actually will go as far as to say you shouldn't teach letter names and sounds till the middle of kindergarten. We don't do that here, but he's really big about encoding and doing that first, so that they have the sound and they have the phonemic awareness before they learn the phonics. Do you have any questions about that? That was a lot. And you're all kind of like,
no,
what?
Which makes sense because there's a lot of kids that struggle with phonemic awareness.
Mm-hmm. A lot of European countries don't even start reading until even 1st and 2nd grade. Some even 3rd grade.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, what is it? I just had a parent conference with one of the parents, and I had some concerns, but she's like, well, in Mexico, like this that you're showing me here, they don't learn until 2nd grade. Yeah.
Yeah.
So she's like, for me, she's like, and we just came from Mexico, so for the little that he's learned, she's like, that's a lot for me. She's like, and no one at home speaks Spanish. Yeah, so like the very little that he has learned, she's like, yeah, that's a lot.
It's very interesting. My own 1st grader is still reversing B's and D's when he's sounding words out. Well, his birthday's June 30th. He's very young for 1st grade. And it's just like that, it's going to work itself out. And if it doesn't, in the next year or so, then I might be concerned. But for right now, if that's his biggest problem, we're good to go. So, if you look, let's see, in your packet, we have this David Madison Things to Remember, and we're going to go over this in a little bit. But his structure is this. A lot of whole group demonstration. He tells a story. He models what he wants the kids to do. And he gets the kids engaged with that story. And we're going to do that in just a minute. And then he teaches and works with them in small group. So he's sitting at a table with like 4 kids. Then it's easy to say, what did you do last night? Who went with you? What happened? And how did it make you feel? As opposed to having 20 kids saying like, okay, now tell me what you did. Now that's disastrous. So he does that part in small group. He has these writing journals, and I only brought one with me because we didn't send them to the coffee shop. I wasn't sure if we were going to order them. But this is one that I kind of made my own for us. But it's basically, it has sight words on here, and then this is the preschool level one. Is a picture up here. They do their writing down here below the line. And the teacher takes notes over here. And he's really big about once kids start writing below the line, whether it's inventive or correct or not, the teacher writes over here or on a sticky note because you don't want to write over the kids' work. And so he has these journals that they use in small group. And then he also has these emergent reader cards. that as they get older and get used to it, they can remind themselves kind of what happened in the story, who was in it, where did it happen, how did you feel, did you say anything, what part were you going to write about, and then it has sight words down here. So as these kids learn the sight words, they can have these cards with them during writing, and you can say, hey, Mom is one of our sight words. Let's make sure we spell that one correctly when we write our sentence.
So those are emergent cards?
Mm-hmm. The emergent reader cards.
Okay, and that's what you had some of those, Rosa, right?
Mhm, Rosa
Emergent
has
reader
some.
cards.
You don't have any writing journals though, right?
I have to double check and.
You might have one.
I might have one.
Yeah, I think we got one.
So what are all the ways to use that emergent reader card?
So the kids can look here to remind themselves what to write within their story and how to plan it. They can use their sight words down here
Okay.
for spelling correctly. And then on the back is just letters, upper and lowercase,
Okay, so it's kind of like
Just
a
a
little
little
cheat sheet
tool.
type thing.
Mhm.
Okay,
that they can have at their center.
okay.
All right, so let's do this little whole group demonstration. Also in your packet of stuff, you'll see a paper that looks like this. This is for your teacher tool. It's how you can plan your writing lesson. So I used it to plan the one I'm going to do for you right now. Okay? So you would sit down with your kids and you would say, I had a fun weekend. This weekend,
That one.
it should be in front of that page. It's light yellow.
Oh,
Yep.
I was looking for the white one.
No, I know. So you would say, this weekend I had a fun weekend. And I draw myself with a complete circle, and then I draw my body, and I draw my 2 legs, and I draw my hands, and I make sure I have 5 fingers. And you're gonna know it's me because I have long hair. And right now I'm gonna leave my face blank because my face is important to my story later. Okay, so I would say, I went to a basketball game. It was in a gym, and I sat on some bleachers. Okay, I watched Logan is my 8th grade son, play basketball. It was a really fun and exciting game. And I just planned out this drawing ahead of time, so I knew exactly what I wanted to do. So I watched Logan, and this is me. And he always wants the kids to label themselves as me. Okay, and then they label other people in their picture with their first name. Okay, so it was a really close game. And it was very exciting. Do you think Logan won or lost? Talk to your neighbor. So you give them that opportunity to turn and talk. So go ahead and do that now, and let's just see what you come up with.
Yes, she's smiling.
Okay, so what did you come up with?
Logan won.
Did they win or lose?
They won.
They won. How do you know?
Because you're smiling.
Because you're
You
smiling.
look happy.
How do people feel when they smile?
Happy. Excited.
Happy, excited. Good. I was really excited. I was so excited that I shouted, "Yay!" It was an exciting game. And they'll never play another basketball game together like this again because they're big kids in 8th grade. So we were really excited for them. Okay. So then, once you're done drawing your story, you're going to write your sentence. Okay? And I didn't leave myself very much room. I totally should have drawn my line. But you would write, I went to a basketball game. And you might say, what do I need to end my sentence? I would need a period. Okay, so you would kind of start teaching your kids capitalization, punctuation as the year goes on. Definitely not at the beginning. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. Logan's team won. So that's the event. This is my setting. I went to the basketball game in the gym. My event is Logan's team won, and how I felt about it, I was excited. And you could tell that by the smile on my face. And it's as simple as that for your whole group demonstration. And he says to start it out like that when the year starts, and do many of them before you sit down with the kids. At least 4 or 5. So they get to see that process of you coming up with the story and drawing it and then writing about it. Questions about that?
So is there always emotion with it, how you felt? Is that always the standard that you, I
That
mean, I can
is-
see why you would do it, but is it always?
It doesn't have to be. That is the preschool standard, including a reaction to the event. So you'd want to include that emotion by the end of the year, which kind of takes us into our next little segment of your packet. Okay, so we have our things to remember. I'm going to let you look over this in just a minute. These are your teacher tools. This is your planner for your story. They help a lot. I tried to do a story one time without this, and it was awful. I missed a bunch of the details I wanted to use. This is something you can use when you're assessing your kids, where they're at within the benchmarks. And then you have anchor papers and benchmark details, pretty much is what this is. And this is what we're going to focus on. For just a minute, take like 2 minutes maybe and look over this things to remember, and maybe put a star or a circle next to something that might surprise you or that maybe you didn't think of before. I got so much to do.
I saw that. You're smart.
What does it mean, be sure to check elements of drawing at each quarter check point?
So that is this
Oh, you're gonna,
benchmarks, yep.
at each
That there's a first quarter for
okay.
preschool,
So then
second
you
quarter.
quarter of actual quarter of school.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
That's what I thought when I looked over it before, okay.
Yeah, it's kind of nice that he just lays it all out with examples.
Yeah, I know this packet's awesome.
Was there anything on there that kind of stuck out or that maybe I haven't mentioned yet?
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
On that, drawing where you said, right here, make sure it's no purple pumpkins.
Uh-huh.
Excuse me. What if kids start drawing and they start doing that? Do we tell them no and get another paper or whatever?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, he says to have them start over. That there's
Isn't
a
that kind
time.
of-
There's a time for creative drawing,
That would be free play.
right? And and that's what he'll say. There's a time for creative drawing, and this needs to be a time for realistic drawing.
So, other things that we've learned, like children's
Like
feelings or whatever, it's at the door now, or?
Well, you don't have to be mean when you
I know,
tell them
but
to
that's
start
kind of,
over.
that's kind
You know, there's a way where
no, that, no.
I think it would be,
Yeah.
I think it would be fair to say, to give kids gentle reminders, maybe for the first few
Well,
times,
yeah, that's what I
and then,
mean.
Yeah,
and
Remind
then-
them instead of taking the paper away,
Yeah.
saying,
Oh, I think it's a little bit of front loading too. What's your story going to be? Well, what color were the pumpkins that you saw there? Or, you know, that can, a lot of that can be taken care of in questioning beforehand. You know, saying, here's
y'all come to my city.
the, yeah,
What?
no paper for you.
Couldn't you take it away and say, we can finish this at free time, but this isn't the right time to do
cause
it?
you could do that at free choice, right? Like,
Yeah.
if
Free
we-
play,
We
that's
could
when you
still
would
do
do
that.
creative writing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's kind of one of those things where he's really big on like, you want these to be realistic stories, so the kids are writing about realistic events for them. So.
We have a big kindergartner.
Yeah. Is there anything else on here that maybe stuck out at someone or you had questions about?
So, sorry.
No, it's fine.
So, like you said, we do this like towards the beginning of the year
Mhm.
until they kind of get it. So they're supposed to be doing their own writing and everything.
that.
No,
No.
you do this whole group.
You
So
do
you'll do
this-
it 4 or 5 times.
No, when the kids start doing it by themselves.
No, I'll show you. Let's go.
Oh, okay.
Let's jump into.
Sorry.
So no, you're fine. Here are anchor papers. So these are what you might use when you're doing your assessments. So you'd look at the end of the first quarter of school, and your kids should just be here. A simple drawing. They haven't even labeled. The teacher labeled, and the teacher wrote down here.
Yeah, I think if I recall from that one, I think at first you just start drawing pictures of yourself or me.
Yeah.
And you just start with the basic shapes, your circle, your circle for your body,
Mhm.
and stick figures for your hands and appropriate.
So take a look at the next packet that looks like this on the front. It's right behind that one that you have open. It also has a first quarter narrative benchmark page, and if you put those side by side, you'll kind of see how they match up. These quarter benchmarks are what our activity and game are going to be about if we have enough time. So this would be the packet that's super important. Okay, so if you look here, what's expected about the student doing the process is they draw first. They draw a picture of themselves first, and then they think of the story. And that's only in this quarter. Okay, and then they point to the parts of the picture when asked about the story. So like for this kid, they'd be able to point when you ask, which one's the doctor? Who's the doctor? Where are you? How do you feel? How do I know? That type of stuff. They'd be able to point to the elements of their picture. They don't have to really orally retell a lot. Surface features the picture. It's kind of recognizable. You can tell that this kid has glasses on, right? They incorporate a character, so they add someone else to the story, not just themselves. They include a few details, like I got glasses. The labeling, though, is done by the teacher. And then orally, the story just may be 1 or 2 words or a short phrase. Doctor and glasses. And that would be right on target for the end of the first quarter of school. If you look to the second quarter, they change a little bit. They begin to talk about the story before they draw it. So that's when you would sit down and say, tell me, what did you do last night? Okay, and then they would start to draw circles, squares, or rectangles to form people. So they might use a circle for the head and a rectangle or a triangle for the body. And then down on the picture, it's more recognizable, and it has a setting that you can recognize. So my picture is actually geared more towards the third quarter, but you can recognize my setting, kind of. Okay. And it may sound like a list of things to do, their story. First, I went to the store, then I bought a piece of candy, then I ate it, then I went home. And that's perfectly fine for them to be right there. Then, third quarter is they know the story before they draw it. They add characters, a setting, an event, and they may contain speech bubbles and thought bubbles. So he believes that speech bubbles lead to writing dialogue in first, second, and third grade. So adding those speech bubbles, like me saying, yay, are really important for kids to start doing because it gets them thinking about how people's speech affects their story. And then it contains more important details. It sounds more like a story, but with support from the teacher. And the teacher is still writing the story on the bottom. Now by the end of preschool, that fourth quarter, the kids are starting to write down there. And that's when you would start writing on the other piece of paper.
On a sticky note.
On a sticky note or the other side of the book to help them. And this kid, you can see, kind of added some sort of speech bubble, but you can't, it's looking or something, yeah. But dad is labeled correctly because dad is one of the words on this paper. So that's one that they've worked on. And the first quarter of kindergarten is exactly the same as the last quarter of preschool, which is super cool. So
For the first couple of weeks of kindergarten, you're reading the last part.
Yeah, and it's nice. Like if we could get this going really good in the next, year or so, then it would be great because right now our kinder teachers kind of start this process in the middle of preschool just to get the kids to learn the process of it. The telling the story, the writing about it, and that kind of thing.
But what would happen with the kids that don't come to school?
Then they would, during your small group, you would differentiate that way. You would still retell you would still do whole group like this, but in your small group, you could differentiate. Yeah.
That's when you would place them differently.
Mhm.
You can go at a slower pace.
Okay, so let's go through real quick the rest of this stuff in the packet. There's this just narrative elements, informative paper, which he says to include in the stories. There's this literacy developmental overview, just for some information. And then on the back is the writing benchmarks in table form. Pretty similar to this here, just in a different form. This is easier for me to look at, but some people like tables. So,